أنا لا يحزنني أن يموت رجل من الشيشان أو امرأة من الشيشان أو طفل من الشيشان، لأنهم إن شاء الله شهداء. لكن الذي يحزنني كثيرا والله سكوت الدول الإسلامية عن هذا، ولا كان الواجب أن تقطع العلاقات بين روسيا من كل وجه، ولو فعلوا ذلك لوقفت روسيا عند حده ولن يضرهم شيئا. ولكن مع الأسف أن الدول الإسلامية، وأعني بذلك رؤوس الدول الإسلامية، دعنا من الشعوب قد يكون عندها حماس وغيرها لكن ما تستطيع، ساكتة ولن تتكلم بشيء. هذا والله الذي يبزيني. جمهورية مسلمة فتية حديثة يفعل بها هذا الأفعال واسكت.
تشكو المذلة باكيا، فإلى متى ستظل تبكي شاكية؟ أتطيب نافسا أن تثير مدامعي مثل النوائح ينتحبن سواسية؟ أتظن أن العز يرجعه البكاء، فالمجد صار قصائدا وأمانيا؟ قل لي بربك هل تريد نصيحتي؟ إني سألتك فاستمع لسؤالي. أوليس موتي في حياتي مرة، لم لا يكون ختامها استشهاديا؟ لما سمت نفس الشهيد مطالبا، على الإله له المكانة عالية.
The Islamic nation, a nation of heroes who carried the banner to great heights, from the Battle of Badr to the conquest of Andalusia, the defeat of the Crusaders, to the rise of Islam in the East, through periods of glory, through triumphs and victories, but also through times of weakness, division, and corruption. Yet from the depths of the sea's foam, there would always emerge a group who kept the banner high, unbroken by the tides of despair. From the struggle in Libya, to the Mujahideen of Bosnia, to the Knights of Afghanistan, the revolution of the Tajiks, and from among them, in the land where the mountains pierced the sky, came true defenders of the religion, the Chechen Mujahideen.
ضاع مجدها، وصارت تذوق المر من ذلها. سكر تقبلك المولى شاهدا منعما، وأمنك الرحمن في ساعة المحشر. خرجت لتحمي أمة ضاع مجدها، وصارت تذوق المر من
حي الكتائب في ثرى الشيشان صاغوه مجدا.
In the final days of the crumbling Soviet Empire, as the red banner of atheism began to fall, the Muslims of the Caucasus saw their moment. On the 6th of September 1991, the sons of Chechnya rose, led by the former Soviet Air Force General Dzhokhar Dudayev, who had returned to his people with a new vision. They stormed the supreme Soviet building of the Chechen-Ingush Republic. This was not just a political act, it was a revolt against decades of communist oppression and an assertion of the Muslim people's right to rule themselves.
Это русские. Никакой веры нет, никакой вере не подчиняются. Не привержены никакой духовности, нравственности, отсюда и морали. И морали. И это к великому несчастью самого же российского народа в массовом масштабе. То, что делается, Чечня — это только предлог, а по сути это суть российского народа, больного русизмом, человеконенавистнической идеологией. А за это трудно, надо расплачиваться.
During the uprising, the local head of the Communist Party, Vitaly Kutsenko, met his end, whether by falling or being thrown from a window, as the old regime collapsed before the eyes of the people. The communist authority in Chechnya was dismantled in a single day. The All-National Congress of the Chechen people, with Dudayev at its head, seized control. The banner of Soviet tyranny was torn down, and in its place, a new cry was heard. Freedom for Chechnya, Islam for the people. With the full support of the population, Dzhokhar Dudayev became the first president of a newly awakened Muslim nation. The Chechen Republic of Guerrilla, Moscow did not sit quietly. In November, Yeltsin sent Russian troops to Grozny to crush the movement. But in a stunning reversal, Dudayev's forces surrounded them at the airport and forced them to withdraw. Russia had been humiliated, its authority in Chechnya broken.
Мы сотни раз предлагали путем переговоров решить этот вопрос, но Россия никогда своих солдат не уважала, никогда своих офицеров не уважала. Это нищая страна, страна рабов, а мы не хотим быть рабами. Из-за этого хотят нас уничтожить. Мы хотим быть свободными. Как, например, Америка в свое время добивалась свободы от Англии. Мы хотим также быть свободными и сами распоряжаться своей жизнью, своей судьбой, своей землей. Из-за этого хотят нас уничтожить. Но это у них не получится, не пройдет. И думаете, они придут еще, да? Пускай придут. У нас нет другого пути. С миром придут, мы миром ответим. С войной придут, будем воевать. Воевать мы умеем, мы можем. Это нам дано Всевышним, мы будем воевать за свою свободу. Более есть за что умирать.
من هول المصيبات أن أبصر وعيني قد جادت من البين أدموعا وقد حفرت خدا على خدنا أحمر.
In 1993, the final break came. The people of Ichkeria announced to the world, "We are free, we are Muslims, and we are independent from Moscow." But such a declaration would not go unchallenged. The fire had been lit, and the storm was coming. Moscow had watched long enough. For 3 years, Chechnya stood as a thorn in the side of the Russian Federation, free, proud, and Muslim. An example of defiance. A flame of independence that threatened to spread. In late 1994, under the command of Boris Yeltsin, Russia made its move. Under the pretense of restoring constitutional order, Russian forces began their preparations. But this was no peacekeeping mission. This was a full-scale invasion. Tens of thousands of Russian troops were mobilized. Tanks rolled toward the mountains. Jets took to the skies. Moscow believed that it would be over in a matter of days, that the tiny republic would collapse like a paper house. They were wrong.
Свобода — вещь дорогая, за нее надо платить кровью. И мы готовы платить, и мы платим за нее кровью. Но своей свободы мы все равно добьемся. Добьемся любой ценой.
On December 11, 1994, Russian forces crossed the border into Chechnya. Columns of armor pushed south toward the capital, Grozny. Villages were shelled, civilians fled. But the Chechen Mujahideen had prepared. Led by experienced commanders, many of them veterans of the Soviet war in Afghanistan, the defenders took up positions in the cities, in the mountains, and in the alleyways of Grozny. Armed with light weapons, RPGs, and an unshakable belief in their cause, they stood ready to resist the invading army.
Народ России — это элементарные рабы. И они сами не хотят из этого рабства выйти. У них вот.
As the Russians approached Grozny, they were met with fierce ambushes. Tanks were destroyed in narrow streets. Snipers struck from rooftops. Entire Russian units were lost in the maze of urban warfare. And then came a night that would humiliate the Russian army and echo across the Muslim world. Thousands of Russian troops were ordered to storm Grozny in a frontal assault. It was a disaster. Columns were destroyed. Troops were cut off and slaughtered. Burning wrecks of tanks filled the streets. The Mujahideen, outnumbered and outgunned, fought with courage that stunned the world. Russia thought it could break the Chechens in one strike. Instead, it had walked into a fire.
دربا طويلا شائكا أو شبه درب مستحيل دربا طويلا شائكا أو شبه درب مستحيل
Grozny had not fallen easily. For every street the Russians entered, they paid in blood. Columns of tanks turned into twisted metal. Entire battalions were ambushed and destroyed. The Mujahideen, though fewer in number, fought with the conviction of those who knew their land. But the Russians would not back down. They returned with fire.
Здесь война не было. Здесь была бойня. Бездарное руководство России бросило просто на убой своих солдат и офицеров. Просто на убой. И сегодня еще добивает остатки российских войск.
In early 1995, Moscow launched a campaign of terror from the skies. Bombs rained upon the capital. Entire districts were flattened. Homes, hospitals, mosques turned to rubble. Civilian blood mixed with the ashes of a once living city. And yet, the banner of resistance still fluttered above the ruins. District by district, the Russians advanced, using overwhelming firepower. But the price was staggering. Russia lost thousands of men. Its most elite units were broken in the alleys of Grozny. Its tanks were picked off like game. It became clear. This was not a war against a weak enemy. This was a war against a people who would not be subdued. By March 1995, after months of siege and unimaginable destruction, Grozny was occupied, but not conquered. The Mujahideen had pulled back, not in retreat, but in strategy. They vanished into the mountains, into the forests, into the villages, like ghosts of the Caucasus. What Russia thought was victory was only the beginning of a new phase, the era of guerrilla war. From the heights of Vedeno to the forests of Shatoy, the Mujahideen reorganized. With light weapons, ambush tactics, and the element of surprise, they turned every Russian convoy into a potential target. Roads became traps, bases became battlegrounds. Even in Russian-occupied cities, attacks struck like lightning, then disappeared into the night. The names of commanders rose to the surface. Shamil Basayev, Emir Khattab, Maskhadov, Abu al-Walid, and many others. They used hit-and-run tactics, IEDs, sniper fire. They struck supply routes, captured weapons, and punished collaborators. The Russian army, built for conventional war, was now facing a Muslim insurgency that would not stand still. And through it all, the spirit of Ichkeria grew stronger. Russia held the cities, but not the hearts. They could bomb villages, but not erase the creed. The Chechen Mujahideen had melted into the land, and now, the mountains of the Caucasus would become a graveyard for occupiers. The cities had burned. The villages had been flattened. The people of Chechnya, young and old, men and women, had been slaughtered under Russian bombs. And among the millions of Muslims of the Caucasus, one man had seen enough. His family was gone, wiped out by Russian air raids, his homeland occupied, his people silenced. That man was Shamil Basayev.
والبد خرجت تسل السيف تشهر حده بوجه عدو أظهر النبئ كالشر خرجت لتغدو غصة في حلوقهم لتشهر سيف الحق أن تغرز الخنجر.
June 1995. With the world ignoring the cries of Chechnya and with Russia raining fire upon civilian homes daily, Basayev made a choice. If they won't listen to the blood of our martyrs, they will hear the echo of our bullets. With around 150 Mujahideen, he crossed into Russia itself, some 110 kilometers north of Chechnya. There, they struck deep behind enemy lines and took control of the area, holding over 1,000 people. The attack was controversial, but Basayev saw it as necessary to force a pause in the war where Chechens faced heavy attacks and desperately needed a victory. Russian special forces moved in harshly, using gunfire and grenades, firing into buildings and streets. Civilians, women, children, and the elderly were caught in the crossfire, becoming unintended victims of the operation. They blamed Basayev. Basayev blamed them in return. Many lives were lost, but the reality remained complicated. Basayev offered peace. Moscow answered with blood. And in the end, after 5 days of fighting, it was Russia that bent the knee.
وصارت تذوق المر من ذلها سكر تقبلك المولى شاهدا منعما وأمنك الرحمن في ساعة.
They gave the Mujahideen safe passage. Basayev and his men returned to Chechnya, untouched, undefeated, and victorious. The operation had achieved its purpose.
Я категорически не согласен с тем, что меня называют террористом. Я не террорист. Я командир разведдиверсионного батальона. Идет война, и я совершил диверсионный акт. И конкретно я даже думаю подать в Международный суд в Гааге. Если то, что Россия полгода здесь творила, это не терроризм, то то, что я делал, это просто детская шалость. Если признают это, что терроризм, что Россия полгода здесь творила, я признаю, что я тоже терроризм совершил, пусть меня судят, но судят наравне с руководством России. А так, козлом отпущения быть.
From the forests of Vedeno to the caves of Shatoy, small cells of fighters began to reorganize. Commanders like Shamil Basayev, Ibn al-Khattab, and Aslan Maskhadov began by coordinating a new phase of fighting, one that would strike when the occupier grew arrogant and careless. But Chechnya was not alone. The cries of the Muslims had reached beyond the Caucasus, and when the dust of war rose, the Ummah answered.
وتنسحب القوات الروسية من فيدنو الله أكبر في تاريخ 30/10/1995 بعد معركة حامية دامت جنوب فيدنو. كانت فيدنو في تاريخ 30/10/1995 بعد معركة حامية مني فيها الروس بأن خسائر فادحة جدا في جنوب فيدنو، وتعهد الجنرال الروسي بالخروج وطلب وترجى القيادة في فيدنو بأن لا يطلقوا على القوات المتحدة. وهذا اليوم هو الحمد لله تحرير مدينة فيدنو في أرض الشيشان في الجبال، مركز الرئيسي للمجاهدين في القفقاز. هذا والحمد لله وصلت معنا رسول الله.
By late 1995 and into 1996, the Mujahideen had rebuilt their strength. The occupiers had grown overconfident, believing they had crushed the resistance. But deep in the forests, beneath the snow and among the stones, the believers were preparing for a storm. And that storm would fall upon Grozny.
فكم أغنى ضمائرنا وأضحى بها
August 6th, 1996. In a stunning operation, thousands of Mujahideen fighters entered Grozny from multiple directions. Their commanders, Shamil Basayev, Aslan Maskhadov, Ibn al-Khattab, and others. The Russians were caught off guard. Their lines crumbled, their troops panicked. Entire units were surrounded, trapped inside buildings, bunkers, and bases. Columns of armored vehicles were blown apart in narrow alleyways. Russian air support? Useless. Their own soldiers were too close to target. The Mujahideen controlled the night. They moved through the ruins like ghosts, planting mines, launching ambushes, and disappearing into the smoke.
Потому что у нас был наш лозунг был «Свобода или смерть». Мы сегодня доказываем, что это был не пустой звук, и докажем. Свобода – вещь дорогая, за нее надо платить кровью. И мы готовы платить, и мы платим за нее кровью. Но своей свободы мы все равно добьемся. Добьемся любой ценой. Пусть останется из нас один человек, но он будет свободным. Пусть один чеченец останется в мире, но он будет свободным. Другого пути у нас нету. Потому что наш народ можно победить, но нельзя покорить. И мы какую дорогу избрали, и этой дорогой пройдем. Чего бы нам это не стоило.
Russia signed the Khasavyurt Accord. They agreed to withdraw all forces from Chechnya. They agreed to end the war. They accepted defeat. The tyrants had been broken. Grozny was rubble. But it stood taller than Moscow. The flag of Russia had fallen, but the banner of Islam still waved. Yet the war was not over. Not with the retreat of soldiers. Because truth must always clash with falsehood until one it's erased. And though the world may forget, and though the traitors may sign papers, the believers remember.
قد فزت يا غندر رمز العلا فخرا وما لي لا أفخر وصحت بأعلى الصوت قد فزت يا غندر يا بطل الأبطال حار يراعنا فما يدري ما نملي وما يدري ما سطر رمز العلا فخرا وما لي لا أفخر وصحت بأعلى الصوت قد فزت يا غندر يا بطل الأبطال حار يراعنا فما يدري ما نملي وما يدري ما سطر وما جد دموع العين حزنا